You've asked how you can cool down your very hot house. You've got a flat roof house and it's very hot in summer. So here's my 2 cents as an architect. So without knowing the complete details, how your house is orientated, how much sun it's getting, how many windows you have, I can't give a complete answer. But seeing as you've just asked about the roof, I'm just going to address your roof. So it's highly likely that your roof isn't insulated because prior to 2011, South Africa didn't really have any regulations around insulating the envelope of a building. These only came into effect in 2011 when our energy efficiency regulations were promulgated, and we were now forced to insulate the envelope of the building. And when I say the envelope of the building, that means the roof, the walls, the windows, and below the building, the floor. So it's highly likely that your flat roof house is hot because the roof isn't insulated. Now, if we go back to your question was, if I put pebbles on top of this flat roof, will it help cool the house down? For us to understand that, we need to look at the insulation value of a material that you plan to place on the roof. This is known as the R value or the thermal insulation. So a value that's high is a good value because it doesn't let heat just go through, and a low value is a bad insulator or it's poor because it just lets heat through. So if we look at concrete and we just look at 100 mils of concrete, its R value is 0.07. So that is why your house is hot, because the sun is literally just shining straight in through your roof. So now if we look at pebbles, and the only information I could find was in inches, an inch of pebbles, which is 2.4 centimeters roughly, is about 0.02. That's a 0.02 R value. So that's only really going to take your roof to 0.09 if you were to put an inch of gravel or pebbles onto your roof. So that's not really going to make a difference. Assuming that you have asked that question because maybe you've seen in movies or on the internet, you've seen gravel on roofs and you're like, okay, why are they doing this? So that is known as a ballast roof. And a ballast roof is actually an entire system of components that are placed on a roof. So you would typically have your concrete, as in your case. On top of that concrete, we always put a concrete that is a finer finish known as a screed. We do that so that we can form the screed to take the water off the roof. And generally on top of the screed, you have waterproofing. What would then happen is you would put an insulating material on top of the screed. The most commonly used material would be polystyrene. Obviously, it has to have a certain thickness, to have a good R value, and it has to be a very hard polystyrene. The polystyrene has to be installed then on top of that, and obviously the joins need to be carefully considered. And then the stones are literally put on top of the polystyrene to hold it off so that it doesn't blow off, because polystyrene is very light, and you obviously don't want to go and fix through the polystyrene through your waterproofing into the substrate. So that's maybe what you've seen, and that's maybe why you've asked about the pebbles. So there the pebbles are going to contribute, but it's really the polystyrene that has that high R value that's going to give you the insulation. Now, there are advantages in that you can put that onto your existing roof and you can retrofit it fairly easily. To me, it also has disadvantages. So the disadvantages here are that over time, biological material is going to collect on that roof, and it's going to collect between the gravel or the stones, and you're going to have plants magically growing up on your roof. And that's simply because a little birdie flies over and he drops something, and maybe there's a seed in there. You have dust accumulation, you have leaves, and so eventually you have a condition where that seed can grow. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that a lot of older waterproofing membranes are very attractive to plants and plant roots. And once that plant root pierces your waterproofing is now compromised and you now start having a water leak. And that brings me to the second disadvantage of this type of roof, is that for any maintenance to happen to your waterproofing membrane, you literally now have to take all of that stone, all of that polystyrene off your roof at great effort, and at great effort equals great cost. You then need to get in there, you need to find the fault, fix your waterproofing, and then all of that stuff needs to get put back on. To me, a third disadvantage is that the surface isn't even. So you're now taking very rigid square boards of polystyrene and you're placing them on an uneven surface, and you're trying to join them as seamlessly as possible. So to me, that's also not ideal. So if you were building, and just a little caveat, if you were building a new house, you wouldn't do it this way around. What you would do is you would do your roof slab, you would do your polystyrene, and you would do your screed, and we wouldn't use a normal screed. We would use an insulating screed, and then your waterproofing. So in that instance, your polystyrene is protected, it's on a flat surface, and it's a lot easier to do. But of course, this is an existing house, so let's get back to the solution here. One of the other, your other options might be to do a polyurethane spray. Now, this is a spray-on application that could get put onto your roof exterior. This might have a fairly high cost, so you want to ensure that you are getting a good enough R value. So you already know that your slab is 0.07, and maybe with your screed, you're up to 0.09. What you want to get to, especially in Gauteng, is 3.7 or up. So you'd need to ensure that your polyurethane spray application has a high enough R value to offset the cost, because I do think this is a fairly costly application. I have tried to engage suppliers of this to confirm, but unfortunately I wasn't successful in getting through to anybody. So I'll maybe confirm in the copy if this is a good solution. Then there is another way that you could address your existing roof, and that would be install a ceiling underneath. Now, there's two ways that you could install the ceiling. One would be a suspended ceiling, where on your slab, you create a cavity, you then have a ceiling board, and you fill that cavity with an insulating material. Now, there are multiple ways that you could do it. You could do a mineral fiber, a fiber, or a blow-in. What's very important to note there is that you cannot compress the insulation, because you then alter its performance. So I've had many instances where I've had contractors who will have a 38 mil space, and they'll then want to squash 100 mil mineral fiber insulation in there, and then they're telling me they've got 100 mils of insulation. They don't. They've got 38 mils. So to do that effectively below your roof slab, I'm going to say you need at least 135 mils as your minimum cavity. Your other option is to use an insulated board. So a lambda board or an ISO board, where it's a board that is already insulated. The ISO board you've all seen, it's the polystyrene with the grooves that look like wood. There you're going to have that type of finish. If you don't want that type of finish and you want a smooth ceiling finish, that's where lambda board comes in. Lambda board has got, I think it's actually got a polyurethane center, and it's got board on either side. The boards get put up, and then you can skim them and plaster them. So to me, that the advantage of the lambda board is that it's got a thinner depth, so you're losing less height, and it can be skimmed. If you don't mind the look of the ISO board with a tongue and groove, then that's fine. You can go for that. The one thing to consider if you're planning to retrofit the ceiling underneath is that you now need to move all your light fittings. So there is a bit of cost when it comes to that. So those are all quite big, maybe fairly costly interventions. Now, in the question, You also said that you like to live with your doors and windows open, so you're not keen on aircon, and that's why you asked a question about aircon. You could also use something called an evaporative cooler. And an evaporative cooler is designed for you to keep the doors and windows open. It's a big box. You've seen it before. You just didn't know what it was. Maybe we'll stick a picture in the video. But it's a big box that has a membrane that gets kept moist. The air then passes over that membrane and then gets pumped into the house. It's much healthier than aircon. The only thing is that it uses quite a lot of water, but you can also put a water recycling tank in place with your evaporative cooler so that you use the same water on repeat, or you use that water in your garden. And it's a ducted system. So you do need a ceiling void, which in the case of a flat roof house is not ideal because you don't have a ceiling void. So that would be another solution, but you'd have to be quite creative about how you duct it. It might mean, for instance, that you have to drop some bulkheads in here and there if you've got the ceiling height. So that could be another solution. Evaporative cooling units are high cost items, so it might actually be cheaper to put a ceiling in your whole house than to install an evaporative cooler. Possibly the most cost-effective solution would be solution 1, where you're creating a ballast roof. Just remember that that comes with certain disadvantages. I hope that's useful in answering the question. I also hope that gives some insight to why it's so important to do things properly at the onset, because they're often a lot more difficult to fix after the fact. So that's my 2 cents as an architect. And remember, I'm just an architect. I'm not an insulation specialist, but this is what I have learned in over a decade of practice, and I hope that helps you.